All right, good Erev Shabbos, everyone. And I want to thank Rabbi Yitzchak Heigh of the Kollel for preparing some Divrei Torah for us on this Erev Shabbos of Parshas Vayikra, Parshas Zachor, where we are also getting ready for Purim. Take it away, Rabbi Heigh.
So in this week's Parsha, Parashas Vayikra, the first word in the Parsha is Vayikra El Moshe. That Hashem called to Moshe, and Hashem spoke to him and told him about the halachos of karbanos. So the word Vayikra is spelled with Vav Yud Kuf Resh Aleph, but it appears that the Aleph is a little small and it's like almost falling off the page. And the Baal Turim points out that the reason why the Aleph is small is because Moshe Rabbeinu felt that it was a little bit too much for him to write in the Torah that Hashem himself, Hashem with Asmo, came and called him. So Moshe Rabbeinu did not want to write. When Hashem told him to write the Torah, Hashem told him to write Vayikra, that Hashem called him. Moshe Rabbeinu was not so good with that because that's a little bit too much, because Moshe Rabbeinu was such an anav. He didn't feel like it was befitting of Hashem to write that Hashem was calling Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to write the Aleph. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to write Vayikra, that Hashem happened to come upon Bilam. It just happened to be, and Hashem said he has to write it, but he wrote it in small. And from here, we learn that Moshe Rabbeinu was a great anav. It does say this straight out in the Torah later on in Parashas Vayikra. However, it's hinting to it in Parashas Vayikra that Moshe Rabbeinu was a great anav, and he did not want that the Torah should say that Hashem actually called him, as if like Hashem was calling Moshe Rabbeinu special. So this is a very great lesson, and the question is, why do we need to know this right here? Why is the beginning of Sefer Vayikra the perfect place to put this lesson? Well, this could have been anywhere. The Sforno writes that Vayikra Moshe, Hashem called Moshe Tamid, Yitech Anad. Hashem called Moshe Rabbeinu all the time, constantly. This is just how Hashem talked to Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem called him, and then they discussed Hashem told him that the Parsha, the topic that Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to teach Klal Yisrael, and that's how it went. First Hashem called him. So the question is, why does this lesson have to be right here? That Moshe Rabbeinu was such a great anav. So first of all, does anybody have any thoughts about this? Why this would be the perfect place to teach us the lesson of humility? So the Rashbam says the Pashup Shat that if you look carefully in the Sefer Torah, the parsha right before Parashas Vayikra is Parashas Pekudei at the end of Sefer Shemos, and there it talks about how the clouds of glory, the Anan was on the Mishkan, and when the cloud was on the Mishkan, Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to go into the Mishkan. Then the cloud would go just onto the Aron, and Moshe Rabbeinu would come in, and Hashem would speak to Moshe Rabbeinu from on the Aron, and Moshe Rabbeinu would be in the Mishkan. And after that, it almost like continues, or at least it has the connection that this is how Hashem would talk to Moshe Rabbeinu, and then it continues that Hashem called him, and it could be every time really Hashem called him, or very often Hashem called him before speaking to him. But since we just talked about the procedure of how Hashem would speak to him, therefore, at least the next time Hashem speaks to him, it speaks it out that Hashem actually called him that time. So that's good for the Pashup Shat, but it could be that there's more behind why this lesson of humility was right here in the beginning of Parashas Vayikra and Sefer Vayikra. So there's a Gemara in Brachos, which talks about when we could daven Shachris, when we daven Mincha. The Mishnah says that Filas HaShachar Ad Chatzos, the time for Shachris is up until Chatzos, it's up until midday. Rabbi Yehuda says you have 4 hours for Shachris. The time for Mincha is until the evening, until Shkia. Rabbi Yehuda says until Plaga Mincha, which is an hour and a quarter before that. Ma'ariv has no set time. The whole night's good for Ma'ariv. And the whole day is good for Musaf. So what's behind this? Why are these the specific times for davening? The Gemara brings down a machlokes which helps explain this. The Gemara says, Itmar was said, Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina Amar. Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina says, Tfilos Avos Tiknum. The Tfilos, our prayers, our 3 prayers each day, were set up by our forefathers, the Avos. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, Tfilos Keneged Tmida and Tiknum. The Anshe Knesset HaGedolah set up the Tfilos corresponding to the Karbanos in the Beis HaMikdash. So Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina is saying that Tfilos were set up because the Avos davened, Avram davened Shachris, Yitzchak davened Mincha, and Yaakov davened Ma'ariv. And that's why we daven Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv today. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says that the Tfilos were set up corresponding to the Karbanos in the Beis HaMikdash. There was a carbon at the beginning of the day for Shachris, then there was a carbon later in the day for Mincha, and then there was leftover parts of the animals that they burnt overnight, and that was for Ma'ariv. So the Gemara proves each opinion. The Gemara brings a brisa, which brings down the psukim that prove to us that Avram did daven Shachris, Yitzchak daven Mincha, Yaakov daven Ma'ariv. And then the Gemara brings a brisa, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that the reason why the times for davening are the way they're listed in the Mishnah, Shachris up until Chatzos, Mincha until Shkia or Plag, and then Ma'ariv the whole night. That's because that's when the Karbanos were for the Tamid Shel Shachar, the morning offering, the Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, the night offering, and then the leftover Karbanos at night, the leftover limbs from the animals. So the Gemara asks, so we see that the times are definitely set up the same times. Shachar's time is the same as the time for the Karban Tamid. The Mincha is also Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim. So it seems like the times of the Karbanos seem to prove to us, just from the fact that these are the exact times when we have to daven, that would be the times when that would be the source of davening, that there were Karbanos, and now they decided to set up davening corresponding to those Karbanos, because otherwise, why are the times exactly the same? So the Gemara says, you're right. The Gemara says that this sheet of Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina, who said that the Avos established the 3 Tfilos, he holds that Tfilos Avos Tiknum. It's true that the Avos set up the Tfilos, but still, Asmichinu Rabbanan Akabanos. The Rabbanan, when the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah established the Tfilos, they made them corresponding to the Karbanos. So the times came from the Karbanos, but really the original source and the original drive to have these Tfilos was from the Avos. So it's interesting that there's a native Yehuda that asks the question, if the Tfilos were set up corresponding to the Karbanos, so we know that, let's say by Musaf, we have the davening of Musaf, and we say the psukim of the Karban Musaf during the davening of Musaf. But that's only really for Musaf, but we don't find that by Shachris. If Shachris is corresponding to the Tamid Shel Shachar, then we should say the Parashas Tamid in the middle of Shachris. And if Mincha is corresponding to the Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, then we should say the Parsha of the Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, the second half of or part, maybe also the Parashas Tamid during Shemona Esrei of Mincha. And by Ma'ariv, we should say the part about that you're allowed to burn the fats and the limbs overnight. So why is it that by Musaf we mention where in the Torah it talks about the Karbanos, but by Shachris and Mincha, and maybe Ma'ariv also, we leave it out? So it's a big question which I'm sure bothers all of us all the time. Like, why is it that we're davening for, as if to almost replace, let's say, the karbanos? Nowadays, that's all we have, and they don't. It doesn't seem to match up. We don't see the psukim. We don't talk about the Talmud anywhere in Shemona Esrei. It does happen to be true that there's a Gemara in Sukkah that during the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, it sounded like that besides for the Karbanos, they also davened then. And the Kohanim had a place where they used to daven in the Beis HaMikdash. They used to daven in the Lishkas HaGazos by the Sanhedrin, because where you learn is where the tefillos are accepted. But for the best, and even though the Yerushalmi is not doesn't sound like that necessarily, the Yerushalmi brings down the story of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva and the busy schedule, and it leaves out that they actually davened. So it could be in the Beis HaMikdash, they didn't necessarily daven. But Parashas, even during the time of the Beis HaMikdash, they still davened, that the tefillos were corresponding to the karbanos, but they weren't in place of them. At least that's how Rabbi Sacharfran wanted to learn that. We see from the Bavli that maybe the Yerushalmi also is maskim, just maybe he didn't bring it down. But really the davening is in place. The davening is not in place of the karbanos. Davening is corresponding to the karbanos. So, but why is it that we do not mention anything about the karbanos in the tefillos? So the Nevi Yehuda says that we think of davening as, we have to daven every day. You have to daven shachris. Get up in the morning. You have to daven shachris. In the middle of the day, you have to catch a mincha. You have to go daven maariv. But it's not just that; it's something you have to do. The shachris mincha maariv is our requesting from Hashem to give us our needs, and that's why we ask for our needs in Shemona Esrei. And it's true, if someone has another need not mentioned in Shemona Esrei, they could decide to daven in however they want, anytime during the day. However, if a person would not know the right way to daven, then really what he could just do is say Shemona Esrei again. He could just say the whole Shemona Esrei as a tefillas nedava, and it could be that it's a good thing to do. Nowadays, we don't seem to do this often, but Chazal did not want to set up Shemona Esrei in a way that it's only for Shachris. It's only for Shachris, you can't do it. Really, davening is not to just fulfill our obligation. It's also true, we have an obligation, but we're asking Hashem for our needs. So we can cry out to Hashem whenever we want. We can ask Hashem whenever we want. So davening it's true that's corresponding to the karbanos, but it's not just for that. It's actually just a way to express that we need Hashem whenever we need Him, and that's why they left it open-ended for us to daven whenever we want. And to make a long story short, the Rambam also based on this Gemara. Rambam
does that work for all three? Can you make an adava for a marif?
Good question. I don't know. Good question.
I guess why not?
Yeah, I never heard otherwise, but I don't know. Like,
I think I'm thinking of something else. Says fascinating. What?
Like when the place can mention that, like if you mess up somehow in davening and you have to daven at tefillas and daven just in case, or there's machlokes a place if you have to go back for I mean, it doesn't seem like the mechalik between making an adava for Ma'ariv or Shachris or Mincha.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's interesting that Chazal weren't masaking the standard tefillas with a carbon nusach and have a nedava nusach.
Yeah.
In addition.
That's a good point. The Nevi Yehuda mentioned that. I just can't remember what he said. I think he mentioned that also. It didn't want to make it confusing or something like that. And it's a good point. The Nevi Yehuda asked that. I have to look back at the Russian and get back to you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So to make a long story short, the Kriyakar actually learns up the pasuk of Vayikra that has Vayikra without the aleph, with a small aleph, as if it's supposed to say Vayikar, the same way it says it by Bilam. And the question is, so why is it supposed to be that Moshe Rabbeinu would have the same treatment as Bilam? That when the pasuk says in Vayikra bracha, "V'loikam navi b'Yisrael Moshe. No Navi B'Yisrael got up like Moshe, but there was a Navi B'Umas Elam that the other nations had a Navi like Moshe, which was Bilam. So the Sifri says that B'Yisrael means that there's no Navi. Yes, that was the Sifri, sorry. So the Kliyakar learns that B'Yisrael, he will come Navi B'Yisrael, that a Navi did not get up in Yisrael, but you can learn that Yisrael is not in Yisrael, it's like for Yisrael, is that because of Christ, Moshe Rabbeinu was zeicha to his madriga. So, if we know this, he said that the Gedolim have the schus to get to their levels because of Klal Yisrael. So, Moshe Rabbeinu got to his level for more than he actually worked on. Like the Kliyakar says that Moshe Rabbeinu did a lot of hakana to try to get close to Hashem, but Hashem gave him much more. Hashem gave him a lot of extra levels to get to his madriga because Klal Yisrael needed it. We had to be taken out of Mitzrayim. We had to get the Torah. And it's almost began Vayikra. Hashem happened to him. It wasn't just because of Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem came to Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem knew Moshe Rabbeinu. Not that Moshe Rabbeinu knew Hashem. Hashem came to Moshe Rabbeinu, gave him extra levels. And because of that, it was similar to Bilam. That is Vayikra. Hashem happened to come to him. According to the amount of the closeness to Hashem that Moshe Rabbeinu got, it was almost like Hashem came to him. Hashem happened to come to him. Wow. And that's why this is in the beginning of Vayikra, by talking about the Kabbanos and the tefillas connected to the Kabbanos, because a big part of the Kabbanos is that we need Hashem, and everything's from Hashem. It's not from us. Whatever we do, whatever situation we're in, it's Hashem gives us everything, and we're bringing Kabbanos to Hashem, we're davening to Hashem in order to show Hashem that we need Him, and that's what Hashem has to show us right away. The first word, that we have to keep our humility. It's not like we have our Kabbanos. No. It's all the way from Hashem.
Beautiful.
Parsha, any more questions?
No
pressure.
The Bilam connection is fascinating. It's just so interesting because that was like the shtoch to Bilam.
That's true. The Kliyakar points out that since Vayikra could be Lashon Tumah, so it still had to say the Aleph to show that it wasn't really.
Oh, interesting. It had to keep the Aleph, so it wouldn't go that far. But we're going to make a small Aleph to get in the connotation that it's not such a chashuv communication.
Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful. All right, Yishakaya, thank you so much, Rabbi Yitzchak Zev Heigh. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Dr. Hart, you're already in Florida, right? Dr. Hart, you're already in Florida, right?
Yes.
All right. Okay. I'm glad you made it there safely. Enjoy your Shabbos there. And thank you all for joining, and have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos.
Freilich and Purim.
And a Freilich and Purim, indeed. Yes. Oh, yes. The class next week is not going to be on because I think we're all going to be, not the most capable of a Zoom share, unless you want to see the screen go upside down.
Yeah.
That could be exciting. Yes.
Would you mind if I have the paper upstairs from the Maybe video? Would you mind if I quickly went to get it just to